Hello everyone. So I will be talking to you about DevOps metrics, what they are, why they are interesting, or so I think, and why you should care. And not so much as a manager, because metrics, measurements, KPIs sounds managing. I'm not saying it's useless to them. I'm saying it's also useful to us. So let's do that. If I get around this thing properly. So far so good. So I'm the guy. You can relate. I'm a formerly or principally a .NET developer. I'm a solution architect as well, and more recently a manager. You'll see why. You will see the traces of manager later. You'll understand immediately. Where does this story happen? It happens in Worldline. So far so good. That's why we're here. Merchant services in the CPO. It used to be called acceptance. It has changed very recently into e-commerce regional, and Worldline Online Payments might be the name that you know the most if you know me at all, or if you know it at all. And I'm today the lead of the platform architecture team in there. So we are talking about DevOps metrics, but what is DevOps? DevOps has many flavors, shapes, many colors. Many people say different things about DevOps, so I will just baseline on what I mean by DevOps for the rest of the presentation. Okay. So this is our organigram. It's not that interesting besides, yeah, people. There are about 150 of those people here. And the only interesting part is to understand as well that it's global. We have Australian teams as part of this big thing here as well, collaborating with us. I'm not saying this to tell my favorite song at Eurovision. I'm telling you this for you to understand the scale and the complexity of what could be beyond this. So, what about the DevOps side of it? What do we mean, or what do I mean when I speak about DevOps? I mean about all those activities and probably more. Those were the ones that came to my mind and that seemed very interesting. So there is the ideation, there is the discussion with product. What are we building? Why are we building? Who are we building with, maybe? There is development. So far so good. That one I think you could have guessed by yourselves. Testing, of all types of testing. We have deployment. That starts to come for some a bit remote. Our DevOps teams actually also deploy their software in all environments. Monitoring. They actually monitor as well their software once in production. They have the alerts. They have the dashboards. I saw someone with a nice t-shirt of Grafana. We use Grafana a lot. So monitoring is part of the DNA of what the team does. And well, once you do monitoring, you also want to be alerted because you don't want to have your eyes on it all day. So we also do alerting all the way to the prod. Incidents, even at 3 a.m. when a virtual machine stops connecting on the network, for example. Small joke for the guys here on front. And customer feedback. So we also receive tickets, basically, Salesforce. People saying, yeah, this doesn't work as I expect, or this didn't stop working, or something like that. The DevOps teams are busy in all these elements. More on some than others, of course, but in all of those elements, and all the way to prod. Because if it's not in prod, it doesn't exist. Okay, and now came the animation. So, DevOps metrics, that's why we were here. And the baseline was just to explain to you where we start from. We are talking about these 4 guys. Who has ever heard about those? As DevOps metrics, or about DevOps metrics? I use the word, one person. I used the word DORA, I used DORA earlier. DORA metrics, still not? Accelerate? Okay, you're in the right place. So let's deep dive on them all. First, lead time for changes. What does that mean, lead time? Because if you ask John, it's one thing. If you ask Joe, it's something else. The theory says this, or at least that's an excerpt I took out of the book. I will explain you which book in a moment. We measured product delivery lead time as the time it takes to go from code committed to code successfully running in production. Okay, so we are talking about commit in your laptop, the moment you do the commit, and the moment it reaches production. In the book, they also will explain that it's not exactly what they wanted to measure. What they wanted to measure is from idea to value. Okay? But that tends to be very, very difficult and very, very variable. And that's all this comes from a study that is done across thousands of industries and thousands of companies doing development. They needed to find a common denominator that was still significantly statistically representative. And that's why they went for this. From commit to deploy in prod. Should be quite straightforward. What did we do about it? Because again, all those things are opinionated a bit, right? So what we did about it is exactly that. More or less exactly that. We said from the first commit that, because a release can bring in more than one commit, but we take the first commit of that release that was not in production, and we take time of deployment minus time of the commit. One important thing to realize, we measure this in all environments. We have this measure for all the 4 environments we work with in Worldline Online Payments, but we don't care so much about the 3 first ones. Again, if you are not in production, you don't exist. So only prod is actually looked at in a way or another. This is one of the metrics that looks at tempo, speed, velocity. How fast can you go? Okay. Second one, deployment frequency. It's easy. Frequency is a number of things by a range of time. That's exactly what this is. We settled, the sentence says, we settled on deployment frequency as a proxy for batch size. In fact, nobody cared about deployment frequency during the study. What they care about is how big are the increments that you are bringing. Because the smaller they are, the least risk you have, the easier they are to roll back. Everything gets easier. The smaller, the best. So, as there was no easy way, statistically speaking, to identify this size of the batch, they settled for the second best thing they had, which was deployment frequency. If you go fast, you cannot go big, right? It's usually not common. You go, the faster you go, the smaller you go. So, if you go very fast, you go very small, so the WIP or the batch size reduces. And what did we do about it? Well, so far we're very, very, very sticky to the theory, the deployments for a given period. So we count the number of deployments, again, on all environments, but we only look at prod. And we're going, again, discussing about time, speed, rapidity. We do have change failure rate, and now we are changing of categories of metrics. We are no longer in tempo, but we are in stability, right? What is this about is the percentages of changes that go to production. Again, production starts reappearing even in the text. That includes for the software deployments, that was straightforward enough, but also changes in the configuration, changes in infrastructure, changes, anything. Anything that is CR candidate, change request candidate, this enters into play. So what did we say? This is hard, there are a lot of changes. How can we make something that we can actually industrialize? Well, we settled on, you know what, let's try to make everything a deployment. Need to change a setting? Deploy. Need to change something else? Deploy. Need to deploy? Deploy. And therefore, we started counting the number of rollbacks. And on the very strict sense of if you deploy version 1, 2, 3 on top of 1, 2, 4, you are decreasing, so you're rolling back. That's a bit the heuristic, the mathematic that is behind the story. You don't need to have very, very extensive courses on that one. So this one is about stability, right? Let's look at the last one. That's also about stability. Blah, blah, blah. How long it generally takes to recover from a downtime, from an issue, okay? Here, it was really hard. When we started doing this, it was in 2020, yeah? When we started doing this, we thought that the good idea was just to measure the number of the time that it takes from the moment I deploy a version that is faulty to the version that is back. I mean, the rollback takes place, basically. But it's not inclusive enough. When you look at it, they don't say every time you deploy. They say every time there is a failure, how fast are you recovering from that failure? That's what it is about. So we are starting, because it's in progress, we are moving towards checking our source of truth in terms of alerting. And again, the second row here can say the name of the product. Pager. Yeah, PagerDuty. So we have a very good source of information over there that actually gives us all the events that were raised to a team because, hey, something is wrong. Hey, something looks fishy. Hey, the CPU is very high. Do you want to do something about it? So we are moving from this, let's count out how long it takes to roll back, to let's count all the failures, all the possible failures that we can actually detect. So we believe that we are getting more into the reality of what it's supposed to measure. And this is about stability. And this was the fourth metric. So on the theory side, we're kind of good. And this is an excerpt also from the book. I do believe these values are from 2017, and they do this study like every year. So there are new values every time. For some reason, when they publish in a book, it's a bit hard to change. So in the study that, as I said earlier, is done over thousands of participants, thousands of industries, payment or even NASA kind of industries, so things that cannot fail, to things like, it's Instagram. If it fails, yeah, no, I know. It might be more hard than I say, but yeah, things that are not essential for life, it ranges on everything. So payments is somewhere in between there, right? What they checked out of the study and what they realized out of the performance of each company is that this distribution happens. So in deployment frequency, if you are deploying between once per week and once per month, you are in the low performers. To prod, again, huh? We're talking about prod here. If you are a medium performer, you are doing exactly the same thing. And you're like, what the hell is this study about? Yeah, it's either you are closer to a week or either you are closer to a month. That's a bit all you need to read that. If you are on demand, multiple deploys per day, that's where the high performance comes from. And again, it's not a value judgment. It's not somebody that say, yeah, I'm a high performer. No, it's about these practices versus the outcome of those companies. That's how it was identified that way, and the segmentation was done. So basically, we all aim at being high performers, don't we? That's why we are here, to learn how to become so. In deployment frequency, yeah, you have to go to multiple times a day eventually in production. If you have a change, get it into prod into an hour. If you have an incident less than 1 hour, an incident or an event of sorts that requires attention, less than an hour is sufficient to solve it. And the change failure rate should be around 0 to 15%, or so they say. Okay, can tell you, we have been doing this for 2 years now. We are not totally on the left side. Huh? There are things where we perform quite okay. Here, lead time for changes, we checked, and we are 80% of our changes are below 20 days between commit and prod. Some are very fast, and some are 5 days. But even it's not an hour. So that's how it is. There's still improvement. MTTR, yeah, of course, we are in this kind of things in our industry is like around an hour, then higher than that anyways. And our change failure rate is around 2% today, which is not so bad. Yeah, lower performance or lower on average, as I said, is a bit to distinguish the last column from the for last. If you're closer to the month, you're probably on the right side. Okay. One very important thing, two very important things that came out of this study. If you go fast, you are stable. Repeat that. If you go fast, you are stable. In order to go fast, you need to be stable enough. And in order to be stable, in order to get these MTTRs on less than an hour, you need to be able to have a lead time of less than an hour. Sometimes. Of course, the configuration changes as well. So if you change the proxy and it broke your application, change it back in less than an hour. Okay? So that's one thing. The second thing that this book explains, and that might be controversial, we can keep for Q&A after, CABs, change advisory boards, predict low performance. Keep that one in mind. Not me saying, it's a book. This book. So that's my bibliography of sorts. This book is life and death for everyone that looks at DevOps metrics or of those things there. If you're interested on what this means, look at the first part. It's what they found. So how they got to these metrics, why those metrics are the important ones, what other metrics they looked at and they discarded. This one is about how to conduct a research of that kind. Sometimes it's just surveying. Oftentimes it's surveying. It's like they ask the developers, how often do you deploy? In this part, they actually explain to you how to build your questions to not lean a person, the responder, to one side or the other. And the last part is, you of course want to be in the first column. So let's give you some tips about how to get there. It's about leadership there. Okay. So I heard it's tech forum, so there must be some tech. This was all blah blah. How does this all work at Worldline Online Payments? We do have a server, APS, among how many? 3,000 now? Among 3,000 others. This guy is talking to our deployment chain. We do use Octopus Deploy. We are a Microsoft Windows Server kind of platform, so majoritarily Windows. And we use Octopus Deploy in order to get there. You could have used Jenkins or any other one that you're more familiar with. And we come from Bitbucket. And some of you will hate me for that, because I know that Kazan is somewhere rooted here, I believe. But worry not, we are moving. We're getting there. So, how does this thing work? Basically, this thing polls this guy and goes every 4. It's a .NET application, a microservice of sorts that does some polling on this guy. Every time that there are deployment, it says, give me all the deployments you know since last time I checked. Kind of question. We do use naming conventions. Yeah, those help. Convention over configuration kind of style. So the name of the service that we deploy here is the name of the repository here. Helps. Something else that helps, the versioning. We do use Git labels to version our code. And once you have the version, once you have the time, once you have the code, you know how to do all the magic of almost all those metrics. If you count properly, there is one you don't get out of this. Which one don't you get out of this? Out of the 4. MTTR indeed. MTTR cannot come from this. For MTTR, we do use our alerting system that is PagerDuty. But yeah, so this is a .NET application that runs, calls that guy. If you wonder how hard it is to build such a thing, it took me 5 days. 5 working days. 5 focus days. Okay, so I believe it's very affordable. But I told you, I became a manager, right? So how does this thing output information, you think? No one? Indeed. Oh. What happened to my presentation? This thing changed. I will let the professional deal with this. Thank you. Merci. Thank you. Applause for the staff. So, how does this thing output information? Let's try it again. Excel. There are 2 reasons about I'm weak. There are 2 reasons about this. The CSV file is a bit of storage, is where we persist the information because all the combinations you don't want to compute them all the time. And the display is done in Excel. There is a very, very strong reason why it's Excel. It's not because I'm a manager, even though. It's because I'm suck at front end. So bad. So bad. So I said, hey, pivot tables and this kind of crap, they do it so well. So I will just use that. And that thing talks CSV fluently, so I use CSV. Though, that's what it looks like. So you have the number of rollbacks here, plotted by month. You have all the services here. Yes, we have microservices and under also deployables. That's why we deploy so much as well. All the teams are here because the teams can select their own in order to inspect themselves. And you have a timeline here. The deployment frequency versus lead time is here too. Again, if you have CSVs, you can do that. Actually, if you have JSONs, you can do that too. So, but I'm sure I didn't convince you with my Excel talk. And I don't convince myself either, because in fact, it was good for the 5 days I wanted to invest in this, but it's showing its limits. For example, there is nothing that replaces a good SQL query. I mean, there are just some things that are easier that way. So we are moving to a database. We are for storing. And the good thing about the database is that Excel too can connect to a database. So I still don't have to touch my front end, right? Yes, but there is one thing that is really annoying me. Every week or so I have to push the freaking refresh all button. Otherwise it doesn't get the data out. And that's annoying as hell. I don't want this thing depending on me. I want this thing to leave. So yeah, I will settle for some front end. I will ask this guy to help me. He's a good front end guy here in the front. So yeah, we'll move to some kind of front end that just auto-feeds itself and I don't have to do anything anymore about that thing. I love applications where I don't have to intervene. So yeah, that's for the tech part. I admit it was kind of a thing for you to come to say that there was some tech. I promised you some benefits, and as developers you should care, right? So let's enter into that. There are 3 main benefits. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Actually, somebody used it during the pitches earlier. Totally random, not inspected. If you want to get better, or if you want to be good, or if you want to know how good you are, how do you know if you don't measure the thing? How do you know that you need to improve? And how do you know you improved after something you did in order to improve? How do you know you betted on the right thing? Maybe your lead time you said, oh, our builds are so slow. It's the build's problem. Yeah, okay, the build took an hour. It takes an hour to build, fine. But you have 25,000 gates after that, and that takes days. So is that hour of the build the problem, or is it the gates that you have afterwards? I'm not saying which one is the right one. I'm just telling you this thing will allow you to check where you stand and also to do something about it. Without data, you are just another person with an opinion. I have the feeling I'm good. I think I'm the best in class. You should trust me. I have very, very little number of rollbacks. Do you count them? Do you know? When you have a very distributed system like ours with hundreds of deployables over 25 teams across the globe, there is no one way to count. So yeah, if you don't have metrics, you will have a hard time convincing the operations people that you are in control of what you are doing, that you are safe, that you are stable, and you are not just another developer that just wants to go to production with whatever he built 5 minutes ago. Arguments. That's important for developers, I believe. At least it was important for me. Yeah, this writing is not great on this background. So something about bottleneck is, I will read it here. The bottleneck is never code or creativity, it's lack of clarity. I will come back to my first statement. If you don't know what's the bottleneck, how can you solve the bottleneck? It's about knowing. So get those metrics out so you know. And if you know, you can get better. Still have a couple of minutes. Good. So those are things that I strongly believe that every developer should care about. If you have a software and you want it to be, and you want to be proud about it, you need this. You need to show this kind of information. But there are pitfalls, and they are not so easy. Compete with no one but yourself. That's actually something I wrote by myself. It's a marathon metric. It's you against you. It's you against you a month ago. It's you against you a year ago. It's you against you in the future. It's about your continuous improvement. Don't go and compare your way of working if you have a single application in one cloud, in one context, with a given governance in place. Don't go and compare that to the multi-countries, multi-geographies, more than 12 hours of time shift between places of development. Don't go and compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to your past self. That's a bit the philosophy of marathoning. That's why I put it there. It's against yourself that you're fighting. So don't even listen to anybody that say, yeah, but you have a lead time of 3 days and those guys have 2 days. You're less good. No, it's for you. It's for you, your teams, you as a developer. Okay. And if somebody says something different than this, tell them. Context changes, organization changes, technology changes. So many differences that doesn't make sense to compare. And yeah, this one is maybe the hardest one of them all. Doing the right thing is more important than doing the things right. There might be at some point in time a sense of brag that comes out of those metrics. Hey, I'm so good. I'm in the high performers column. So great. You should be like me. Yeah. But are you doing the right thing? Are you actually bringing value if that industry, if that conveyor belt that is so nice, so well built, so performant? Are you building the right product to the right audience? Are you getting value? Are you getting revenue? Or are you getting whatever you are supposed to get out of it, of the thing that you build? Because if you go fast and well, but in the wrong direction, it's the wall that you will meet and much faster than you would if you are not performant. So take these metrics as an indication of how well your conveyor belt is performing in a way, how well as an organization you are doing, not if you are doing the right thing. These metrics don't cover for that. You must have other kinds of elements in your organization to cover for that. That was my conclusion. So I move.